So let's talk about crime. You might be wondering why we're talking about crime when I'm talking about trust and building leadership. But the reason I want to talk about crime is because the game I'm going to share with you is called the Prisoner's Dilemma. The Prisoner's Dilemma game is a really neat way of explaining how trust can be built between yourself and your colleagues, and more importantly, your customers and your clients. So as I go through this story, take a moment to think about how you would react in this situation. So imagine this. You and your friend are part of a major crime family, but you've been arrested. You've been put into cells in a police station, but these cells are separate. So you and your friend can't talk to each other. And then the prosecutor comes by to you and says, and gives you two choices. You can either rat out your friend on the potential crimes you're up for, and you go free, but your friend goes down for 20 years. Or the second choice is you stay silent. And because they don't have enough evidence, you would only go down for 1 year. And if your friend stays silent, you would both only go down for 1 year. So those are your two choices. Do you rat out your friend so they go down for 20 years and you go free? Or do you both stay silent and just go down for 1 year? So here's the dilemma, because you don't know what your friend is going to say. Are they going to rat you out? Are they going to stay silent? That's the interesting question. That's the interesting dilemma. And how this relates to trust is because when this game is repeated over and over again, studies show that when this game is repeated with strangers, more often than not, you will rat out your friend because you don't have a relationship. However, if you repeat this game over and over again with the same person, you start to build a relationship, you start to build reputation, you start to build trust. And as a result of that trust, both parties, both you and your friend, stay silent. You mutually benefit from the situation. So the point here is, when you see a long-term benefit over time with a relationship with other people, it's human instinct for actually us to create benefit. So how does that work in business? How do we build trust with strangers in business? So a great example is eBay and Amazon. They've created these trusted platforms where strangers interact. Think about it. You're on eBay trying to sell something to someone else, and they don't know who you are. And likewise, when you're buying something from eBay or indeed on Amazon, you don't know who you're buying from. But here's the trick. Here's the rapport. Here's the relationship. Here's the trust. eBay and Amazon have both built up the reputation, the reviews. So you can go online and look at the reviews and then know what that person has done in the past, how they interact with people. You start to understand, you start to build trust with them. And this is an awesome way of building trust, because you're starting to build that reputation. And this translates into our day-to-day lives as accountants, because once we start to build up trust, we really start to understand the benefits of that. So let's talk about those benefits. It starts with the biggest one, which is when you build up that relationship with your clients and stakeholders and your colleagues and team, ultimately you have a better relationship. You have better client experiences. Imagine that. You're actually working with clients who actually are easier to do business with. And as a result of that, you're starting to build better leadership skills. You become a stronger leader because you're giving direction to your teams, you're giving clarity to your clients. People look to you for accounting advice. And then more importantly, less stress. Who doesn't want less stress in their day? So these are the benefits of building trust, which is actually scientifically proven. There's a McKinsey study that shows how, as a result of trust, we get better quality clients, we have stronger leadership skills, and we have less stress in our day. So in summary, as a trusted advisor, people listen to what you say. So how awesome is that? That's what we want to achieve. That's what we want to get to. We want people to listen to what we say because we have so much great knowledge, so much accounting information, so many ways we can help our clients. If only we could just crack that nut of being trusted advisors. So why aren't we all trusted advisors? If it's just a case of building trust, why don't we do it? And there's a number of reasons. And from my work with finance teams and accountants over the last 15, 20 years, it's very similar to my background in IT, where a lot of challenges come our way, particularly around we have awkward clients. Who doesn't have clients which we're just frustrated with? Who doesn't have cash flow issues? You're running a small business. You're trying to manage day to day. You get wrapped up in making sure cash flows are good. We don't have enough time. We're overwhelmed. There's so much coming at us. There's so much going on. How do we make time to become trusted advisors? And people problems. So not only clients, but also our teams and the people we interact with. It's just the human nature. It's not always as easy. People don't always act as we expect. So now I want to ask you, what do you find the most difficult aspects of being an accountant? And we're going to launch a quick quiz now to see what you think around is the most difficult aspect. So awkward clients, not enough time, people management topping it there, which is very common. I do see that a lot with the finance teams I work with and accountants I help. So not enough time is very common. And I'm going to be sharing later on some ways to deal with overwhelm. There's so many things coming at us on a day-to-day basis. How do we deal with that? So I'm going to share a real neat trick on how you can deal with that. Can we bring up the Q&A? I'd just be curious to know what the other comments were as well there as well. Fast pace of changes, knowledge about a new issue. Yes, accounting rules changing, IFRS 17 coming in for some of my clients, and how do we deal with that? Managing expectations from Kathy here, both staff and other partners and clients. Yes. And I'm actually going to pick that up as a very specific topic because how we measure expectations with each other is one of the key elements of building trust. So let's break that down. You're probably saying, that's great, John, but what do I do? How do I build trust? And being very analytical and technical, similar to accountants, what I did is I found that I needed to understand what trust is. How do I create trust? Because some people just have it. It seems to be magic. How do they have I just trust them. And then other people, they don't. So how do we do that? So what I did is I did some research, and over my career, I've looked back on how I've built trust. And I encapsulate it into this trusted advisor name. But in reality, it's actually a fairly straightforward formula, which as accountants, I know we all love, because what's the formula for becoming a trusted advisor? So it's 5 elements. Starts with clarity, which will convey in plans, the connection with others. And that's not just about being close to someone, that's just about understanding where they're coming from. Then we get into credibility, your expertise. It's not enough to just be qualified. It's not enough to have 20 years accounting experience. You need to really convey that expertise. Consistency. This is one of the easiest to do, but yet the most difficult to implement. I see people failing on this one all the time, and it's the easiest way to build trust. And then finally, contribution. How do I share my value with you in a meaningful way? So we're going to cover each of these 5 topics in today's session and really break this down into actionable steps you can take away and use with your teams. But you're first saying, well, John, how do you know that? How did you come up with this? Well, as I mentioned, I come from a very technical background. As a wee lad growing up in the 70s and 80s, I loved technical things. I liked my radio controlled car. I loved Technic Lego. I liked following formulas and processes, putting things together mechanically. I was the classic introvert growing up. I still am. But what I found is that when I qualified, I went through my graduate degree, got my project management certificate, got my certified management consulting certificate. I was qualified. So why aren't people coming to me? Why aren't I just attracting new clients, new business, more exciting work? I was actually just getting busier than ever. something wasn't right. So what I realized is that relying on my expertise alone isn't enough to build trust. What I found is that when I actually broke out of that introvert shell and started to make strides into connection and contribution, two of the key ones we're going to cover today, that my career really took off. Life was still busy, because I think we're all busy, but it became slightly easier. It became easier to understand how to interact with people. And as a result of that, I now want to share this with you. That's the purpose of today, is to really help you understand how this formula for building skills as a trusted advisor. And now I work with accountants to help grow their revenue in their small practices, but also take control of their careers. It's not just about the money. Money's important. Money's a facilitator. But if fulfillment is what really makes purpose and meaning. So let's dive into this. Let's get into it with, what does trust mean to you? Because we need to define it. We need to baseline this before we get into the 5. So again, I want to just throw out a quiz question to you. What's your definition of trust? And I've put some examples there, and also be curious if there's another thing you want to post in the Q&A there. Is it built over time? Is it a two-way street? Is it personal? Is it broken easily? What do you think trust means? Okay, let's end the poll and share the results. So built over time, yes. Two-way street, it's not just, you can't force someone else to trust you. It is a two-way street. It's personal. Interesting statistic around personal trust. You can't trust a finance team or an accounting team or an accounting company, but you can trust the individuals in that accounting firm or that team. So it's very personal. You might make a really good connection with that one or two people. Broken easily, yes. I'm going to come on to the 2 areas where if you don't do this, it's the quickest way to break trust. But also, there's one of the number 4, the consistency is actually the quickest way to build trust as well. So we're going to cover that in terms of built over time. And the Q&A, yes, yeah. Greg and Kelly saying all of the above. Absolutely. It was a bit of a trick question, actually, guys, because this is true. You spotted that it is actually all of these things that build trust. So let's get into it. Let's start to make this real by starting with number 1, starting with clarity. So what does this mean? Clarity is about how we convey our information in plans, in schedules, reporting calendars, processes. It's about being very clear on where we're heading and how we're getting there. And just to start, I wanted to give you a quote from Steve Jobs, because it encapsulated this point very easily, very neatly. If you're working towards something that you really, really care about, you don't have to be pushed. Clarity pulls you along. Think about that. If you create clarity for yourself, for your clients, for your work, suddenly that it helps you move in the right direction. It stops you getting distracted. And ultimately, your clients want to work with you because you're providing that clarity. So if we break that down, why is it so important? Why is this number 1 of the 5? And a number of reasons. The first one being that it creates priorities. So when you have that clarity, you're able to describe exactly what you need to do and when. And that's really important. That's why I have this as number 1, because when you give priorities to yourselves and your teams, that helps you build leadership, which leads on to number 2. So if you have the priorities, you can then start to build more leadership qualities with your clients, because they're looking to you for that direction and they're getting it. You're providing that priority and that direction for them. And as a result of that, you become more efficient. You can deal with more clients, you process their work more quickly. You're not distracted. And that's the key thing with priorities, is it avoids distractions. I'm going to focus on just this one thing. So I want to illustrate this with a story, actually, of a client I was working with recently. They called me up and said, "Hey, John, they're a small manufacturing company in Ontario. The finance team, the CFO, called me up and said, we want to automate our sales process. We need to potentially replace our ERP system, which is old and aging, and we're growing really fast, so we need to automate. Just come in, automate everything. I said, okay, that's an interesting way to start, but respecting their views, went in there and had a good conversation with them. What I like to do for the point of clarity is step back. What's the real problem here? And I outlined a process. I outlined how I work with my clients to make sure I'm spending your valuable money in the most efficient way to get most value. So we took a step back and said, what I'd like to do is just interview a couple of members of your team, understand what's going on, how you work together, and then look at the sales process and your ERP. And then I'll come back with some recommendations. A real quick assessment in 2 weeks, just to set the stage and make sure we're really understanding the root cause here. What we found is that, yes, automation would be helpful, but the bigger problem was around two teams communicating, the sales team and the manufacturing team, and then the finance teams getting the information. They weren't sharing information in an efficient way. They didn't have one central store, even though the ERP was supposed to be their central database. It wasn't storing the information correctly or being updated correctly. As a result, they ended up phoning each other, running down the hallways, texting each other. There was a lot of inefficiencies, a lot of fires going on. So what we found is that replacing the ERP wouldn't actually solve the problem. Not yet, anyway. What we found is we needed better prioritization. And because I had that clarity on how we're going to run this solution for the client, I ended up recommending some ways for how they better work together as a team, which is ultimately less money than jumping straight to a new ERP or automation. So they got a better result, and I felt better about the result I was giving them. So again, that clarity, like making sure you're totally crystal clear on what you're trying to achieve, is absolutely important. So how do we do this? How do we build up clarity? And there's 3 key ways. It's a journey. So when I went to my client about the process I was going through, I asked them their opinion. I said, I like to do the assessment, the interviews, come up with recommendations. Is there anything else you'd like me to consider? Does this make sense? Is there anything else I'm missing? As a result, they said, yeah, we want to make sure you talk to the finance team, not just the sales and the manufacturing team. Make sure you talk to the finance team as well. So they built this journey, this together. So when we work together, we work through the problems together as well. So when you're working with your clients and your customers and your team members and your partners, you outline the journey and then get their input on it. Don't feel you have to solve this on your own. And then give them context. This is absolutely key, because if you set the context, it gives even more clarity to the problem you're trying to solve. So I was working with a finance team just the other day, and we were talking about delivering updating one of the working papers to make sure the financial statements were correct for the year month end. The CEO needed a report by this Friday. So me giving the context of this working paper update, the formula updates to the finance team, because the CEO needed the report by Friday, really focused their attention. And that was key because they had the context. They knew how to work faster on this. We deprioritized the work, got onto that report and that working paper formula as quickly as possible. As a result, we got to delivering what the CEO needed by Friday. So you have to give context. Could be a deadline, could be a bigger industry challenge, could be a new regulation coming in, IFRS 17. What's the context for the work we're doing? And again, if it doesn't directly contribute to what you need to do, you can park it. And we'll come on to priorities in number 4. So again, I always like to make sure you can see how this makes it real. So here's an example. Here's my vision delivery roadmap, which I use with my clients when I'm working with finance teams and accountants. I show how here's the process we're going to go through. Starts with the vision, the OKRs, the objectives, key results, build a roadmap, deliver, and realize. Number 1 mistake for when someone has clear vision, they have that clarity, is they jump to delivery. They jump to step 4. And that's a mistake because you're not measuring you're not knowing how you're going to get there. You don't have a roadmap. You're not measuring the results. You don't have your objectives and key results. So how do you know when you realize the benefits, you've actually achieved what you wanted to do? So make sure, even if and the key thing about roadmap is it also engages your team. You're starting to go through that journey together. So again, just an example of how you outline something as simple as a 5-step process. Here's what we're working through. Just setting those expectations, and then the context, which may be a deadline. So let's see how much you remember of this with a quick quiz. So what plans could you share with your clients to give clarity? Okay, I think we can share the poll now. We've got most people in there. So yes, all of the above. Most of you saw that, which is perfect, yes. I do like the idea that some of you are identifying specific things, the reporting calendar, the engagement process, and the meeting agenda. It's neat to pick out individual items because, those are areas you can focus in. Because trying to focus on everything can get difficult. So if you're going to focus anywhere, picking out 1 or 2 of these is actually really good. I love the idea of a client engagement process. That's what I look for from my accountant when I'm working with them. That's what I make sure I give my clients when I work with them. How are we going to work together? What's the steps we're going to work through? And more importantly, does this work for you? Because if this process doesn't work, I'm dragging, remember the Steve Jobs quote? I'm dragging them along. Whereas if we have clarity and we're all agreed, we're pulling in the same direction. The clarity is pulling people along. I'm actually going to talk to how a meeting agenda is a critical item for building trust towards the end. So look forward to that in a second. I'll just check the Q&A, make sure I've covered everything. Yep. Okay. So next, we're going to move on to, that was clarity, number 1. We're now going to move on to connection, conveyed in empathy. So this one, full disclosure, as an introvert, I really struggle with this. Less so now because I've understood connection in terms of how I use it and use it to help other people. But as an introvert, I thought connection meant you had to go to the big parties, you had to be social, you had to be loud, you had to give amazing presentations all the time. But what I found is that connection, as I mentioned there, and empathy is just about understanding other people. So it doesn't have to be personal. As long as you may understand where they're coming from and how you can best help, that's a connection. And it can be just work related as well. So here's how we break down connection. Again, so John, how do I use connection to build trust? So before we do that, who doesn't trust Tom Hanks? I'm sure there's some virtual hands going up in the air now. But yeah, not only does Tom Hanks have a trustworthy face, he plays trustworthy characters. Plus, for anyone who's seen him in real life or on the TV, he's just a naturally a trustworthy guy. And that's not by accident. He's chosen his trustworthy roles deliberately, but also his face is actually inherently more trustworthy than some other people. So for example, his chin is slightly wider. That generally indicates good trust. He's smiling, or they're smiling, the happiness, that helps with trust. And unfortunately, fortunately or unfortunately, women are actually slightly more trustworthy than men because they have that maternal aspect as well. So although Tom Hanks has trustworthiness, for any of you women out there, there's actually even more inherent trustworthiness you can bring just by being a woman. So what I want to do now is just show you how there's actually science behind this. Because when we look at Kim Kardashian, Meghan Markle, or Vladimir Putin, who do we trust more than the other? And this is where science comes in. They actually did some analysis on this. And when we look at faces, we actually find that people are just inherently more trustworthy based on how they look. As I mentioned before about the wider chin, bigger eyes, things like that. So for example, Kim Kardashian is actually on a scale of trustworthiness on face value alone, 92% trustworthy. whereas Meghan Markle is 57% trustworthy. And as you can probably guess, Vladimir Putin, 28% trustworthy. And again, this is just purely based on face value, our initial human instinct of could we trust them or not. Because believe it or not, our brains actually make a trust decision of someone within just a blink of an eye. It's about 300ths of a second when we see someone. That's how quickly we decide if we're going to trust them or not. It's not the only factor, but it's that initial reaction that as humans we have, because back in the Neanderthal days, we had to quickly decide if someone was going to attack us or be our friend. So we looked for certain facial features. So we still do that today. And a real quick tip, as I mentioned, just smiling. Just smiling when you meet people inherently gives you a little bit more trustworthiness. So just to bring it back to connection, because we don't always have faces like Vladimir Putin or Kim Kardashian, which may be a disadvantage or advantage depending where you're coming from. So how do we make it real? And this is where I love this quote from Stephen Covey. Seek first to understand before being understood. This just captures connection so well. And the easy way about this is if we're just asking questions. Again, it's not about that personal connection. It's about a personal connection, but it doesn't have to be. It's just being interested in someone else so we can give our information the way that will resonate most. So let's break this down even further. Let's break it down into, okay, how do we create connection? And there's 3 steps. Starting with number 1, share a story. And you're going to say, John, I don't have any stories. I'm just not a good storyteller. And that's okay, because it doesn't have to be a formal, amazing story. It could just be as simple as what you did at the weekend, what birthday party you celebrated with someone virtually, maybe dog training or agility, which I do a lot of dog training with my border collie, is just sharing something from something you've done. It creates a connection. By the way, the best way to create a connection through a story is share an embarrassing story. Not everyone's comfortable with that, but if you're up for it, it's one of the quickest ways to create a connection is being open, sharing something that's slightly uncomfortable. So, for example, another time I'll tell you about when I was studying for my graduate degree in electrical engineering. I actually electrocuted myself. So being an electrical engineer qualified person, I made the simple mistake of actually electrocuting myself. I'm still here to tell the tale, but again, just a slight connection there. Collaborate. So if we just zoom back from storytelling for a second, how do I build connection with my clients, my partners, my team? Is just working together. As simple as that. We often forget the benefit, especially in this virtual environment, because it is a little bit more tricky just to pop by and ask a question, have a conversation ad hoc. It has to be booked, has to be a call in this virtual environment, but it doesn't mean it can't be done. With the power of Zoom and some other Teams environments and our virtual whiteboards, we can still collaborate. We can still just have a discussion on how things could be built. And again, you're building that connection because you're actually collaborating, working together on something. And asking questions. If nothing else, ask a question first. How do you feel about this? Is there anything else I should know? We've gone through your reporting calendar. We've gone through these numbers. We've understood how your cash flow is. What else is going on with your world? What else can you tell me which might help us solve this problem? Just as simple as that. It's, again, easy to forget, but very easy to do. So then I want to leave you on this number, because we've gone through number 2, which is connection. I want to leave you with a toolkit on how you build trust in connection really quickly. So again, listen, play back what they said. So and repeat, then brainstorm, collaborate together, and then plan the solution. So what does this look like? listen, tell me more about that. What do you mean by this? How can we work better on this? How can we get to a better result? One of my favorite questions, where do you want to be? We're talking about the automation process of a sales process, or working through getting data quicker into our working papers. What does good look like? Where do we want to get to? And then play it back. Repeat what they said. Check the understanding for yourself, but also you're checking it to them. So I heard you talk about your working paper. You wanted to automate the data flow. Sounds like the issue is you're not getting data quickly enough. Sounds like you're having to pull it from different, say, data sources. Or it sounds like your clients aren't paying your invoices quickly. Is that correct? So what does good look like? I'd like my clients to pay quickly. I'd like to get the data on time so I don't have to put a request in. You brainstorm with them. What does good look like to you? And then what do you do next? Plan. I suggest we do this. I suggest we build up an audit of who's paying which invoices quickly, and maybe give them a discount. And then we make sure each month we chase down those who are not paying invoices. If the data's missing, how can we get ahead of that? And what do you think? The key question there, which I love the most, what do you think? You're just asking their opinion. So as we round out, so I hope that's helpful. Again, I like to share this back, pay it forward to folks. So feel free to use this with your teams. It's a really neat tool. And just in your next meeting, just listen, play back, brainstorm, and plan. Doesn't have to be a big deal. So let's have another quick quiz. An easy way to connect is to listen, play back, brainstorm, and plan. Tell, sell, send the contract. Listen, smile, agree. Ignore, talk about yourself, mic drop. End the poll and share the results. So yes, most of you got it right, which is the listen, the playback, the brainstorm and plan. Real easy steps, but just something to remember. Make sure you remember to do it. And a couple of folks, yeah, the listen, smile, agree is absolutely key, but doesn't go quite far enough. If you're just listening and agreeing, it's a very passive role. Doesn't build trust. It makes you be a nice person, friendly, but doesn't build trust, as well as playing back, brainstorming and planning. And then thank you for the person who said ignore, talk about yourself, and mic drop. I like that. Not the thing to do, by the way, but I appreciate someone saying that. Okay, perfect. Credibility, conveyed in words. So you might think that, well, I am credible. I'm an expert. I have my qualifications. And what I want to do is give you a very different perspective on this, because we have expertise. We're all specialists in our roles, our jobs, our careers, our lives. But I want to ask you to make sure, how do we share this knowledge? Because we don't want to be selfish. And you might say, John, how is not sharing my knowledge selfish? And the reason I say that is because you have amazing skills to share. We all do. But by not conveying this properly in words, not conveying this to other people, you're not helping them solve their problems. So you're actually keeping all that good value to yourself. You're actually being a little bit selfish. So what I want to do is give a different perspective on how we put across our credibility. And you might say, well, John, that's just being arrogant. You're just telling people how great you are and how you can solve everything. And that is true. You have to be careful. But there is a key difference between arrogance and confidence. So arrogance is telling. Arrogance is saying, I know best. I have the right answer. I'm going to tell you what to do. Whereas confidence is about knowing you have a good answer, but more importantly, you're asking the question first. Again, going back to the connection there, you're seeking to understand before you're understood. So confidence is around having the expertise and the knowledge, but conveying it in the right way by asking questions. So let's dig into this, what it actually means. So we talked about expertise. So this is a thing in terms of your depth of relationship, how much you know about someone, a team, an industry. versus the breadth of that knowledge. So depth is really down to the weeds. Breadth is how much you know about the bigger perspective on things. And just to make this a bit more real for you, it's the expertise versus trust. And don't get me wrong, if you want to be an expert and be very narrow niche, that's good. Back to the clarity, number one, be clear on that, own it, go forward with it. But if you really want to build trust with the groups of people, because again, trust is built when you have a reputation with others, when you have mutual benefit over time. And for that, you need to have a depth of relationship to know more about them through connection. But then more importantly, you have more knowledge about their industry, their teams, their departments, their companies, their situation. That's where connection comes in. That's where real trust building comes in. So the more you get that depth and that breadth, the more you'll start to build trust. So again, let's show this how it makes sense in terms of very specific actionable steps. Number one is be curious. Similar to asking questions, but again, going back to that connection in terms of you ask the question and play back, have that curiosity. We get so busy in our day-to-day lives, we just want to process, just knock another item off our to-do list. But if you step back and say, okay, how could I look at this differently? How could I come at this from a different angle? How could I solve this in a different way? Just be curious. And again, it doesn't have to be just you. Remember the collaboration? It's about collaborating with your clients, your partners, your customers, your team. Let's explore something new. And you might say, John, that's a waste of time. We're so busy. And that is true, but it will pay off. Because what I've done from working with my clients is when I've worked through that curiosity is that I found that there's other areas I can help. When we talked earlier around an automation thing for that manufacturing client, by being curious about what the other teams were working through, the challenges they're up against, like I said, communication was the biggest challenge, sharing that knowledge between the teams. So just having that curiosity is absolutely key. Pre-chewed conclusions. Sounds a bit weird, doesn't it? But pre-chewed conclusions are my way of just phrasing that you're walking someone through the end result. Rather than just presenting the number, the report, the fact, you're actually walking them through it. We talked earlier around the journey. So pre-chewed conclusions are how you bring someone along for that journey. Again, a great example is when you're sharing a report, you're showing how they got to those numbers. So when you're explaining about a cost element, maybe the salaries are coming under budget and you're not sure why. So the end result is that salaries are under. But when you pre-chew the conclusions, you start to dig into that to understand the fact that the salary underspend might be due to the machines breaking down, which means we're not spending as much time on the per hour rates, which means people aren't working as hard as they need to. And it's all because the machines are breaking down. So it's a maintenance issue, not a salary issue. Again, you're walking them through that journey. And then finally, a bit something to just work through there is it's not about being right. It's about getting to the right answer. So again, back to that arrogance versus confidence. It doesn't mean you have to be right. It doesn't mean you have to. I know we often feel that we're the experts, we're the accountants, we're the domain knowledge keepers. We're expected to have the right answer. And don't get me wrong, we are, but it's about getting to that right answer. That's the key, getting. So you may have to collaborate with others, ask other people, just work through that to get to the right answer. No one expects, as long as you set the scene, no one expects you to have the right answer straight away. So then let's just recap your knowledge on this with another quick quiz. So you're at a client meeting for the first time. What can you do or what can you say to show credibility? So we're going to launch the poll here. Say, what can you say or show your credibility. Some metrics are important. You'll do some research and come back. I read an article I think might be interesting, or other, comment in the Q&A or the chat. Let me know your thoughts on other ways you can show credibility. So the answers coming in here. And this one is multiple choice, by the way. You can select more than one answer and share the results. So yeah, so what can you do to show credibility? Ask the questions. What metrics are important to you? I'll do some research and come back with options. I love this one. That's why I put it up there. It's so easy to do. It takes a bit of effort, not usually much effort, but it adds so much value. My clients really appreciate the fact that I'm thinking about how I can give them some more information and value. And also it helps me understand their situation by doing that research. And likewise, the article, again, it puts you in a position of understanding their situation and sharing that with them. Then the Q&A, the comment there from Dennis. So thank you, Dennis. He said, ask them what keeps you up at night. Great question. I often find it depends on the relationship you have with your client as well. I often find that what keeps you up at night can be a bit blunt. Don't get me wrong. If you have a place to use it, do it. What I've also found is variations on that work quite well. So for example, what else is going on with you as part of the intro discussion? Or is there anything else we need to consider as part of this solution, this report? And then yes, what keeps you up at night is a great one if you can get that in there as well. Awesome. So that was credibility. So now we're moving on to number 4 of the 5, consistency, conveyed in actions. So as I mentioned, this is the easiest to do, but the hardest to get right, because your customers, your team, your partners, your colleagues, they won't listen to you if you don't have consistency. It's one of the quickest ways to build trust, but you have to put a bit of effort into it. It's not a lot of work, but it is a bit of effort. So let's talk about that. Simple as doing what you say. And I know some of you are saying, I'm too busy, I've got too much to do. I don't want to tell them it will come back I'll get the report by a certain day, because if I miss it, then I'm going to break that consistency and break that trust. Fair enough. But what you can do is say, I'm going to aim to get you that report by 5 o'clock on Thursday. And then it gets to 4 o'clock on Thursday and you're not going to do it. You just reach out to them and say, hey, I know I promised you it by 5, but I need to spend a bit more time to get it right, or I'm waiting on some information. Can I get it to you on Friday or Monday? Again, doing what you say. It's a commitment, but it's making sure you're keeping that client or that expectation relevant and current. Ask what they need. We often think we jump to solution. We often think we know the answer. And again, back to the previous point, it's not about being right, it's getting to the right answer. So just a quick check at the end of the meeting is a recap to say, okay, we'll pull this together into this database. We're going to then look at these reports and then create the dashboard to give you a summary of invoice sales over customers. Is that what you're looking for? Is there anything else we're missing? Is there anything else you'd like to see on this report? Again, just that playback at the end, just to say, is this the way you want it to go? Because as they go through it, they might find different things. And then don't hide. Again, a bit of a controversial one there, but I want to just be really clear. I've lived and breathed this. As an introvert, I used to hide all the time. I used to think that as long as I don't say anything, I don't commit to anything, then I can't fail. But what I realized is that not only was I letting myself down, I'm not sharing my value with other people, and I'm letting other people down because I had all this great knowledge and expertise and I'm not sharing it. And again, it doesn't mean you have to be arrogant, doesn't have to mean you're extrovert and shouting from the rooftops about how great you are. It's purely as simple as asking questions or just being curious. The point is, hiding never wins. Even if you know you should be, what I found is my wife often gives me this tip is if I'm stressed and worried about something, she often says it's probably something you're not doing. which is really powerful for me, actually. It's probably something I'm not doing. So I just step back, again, take that context view. What should I be doing that I'm not? And it might be an uncomfortable conversation, but not hiding will always get you a better result. But you might say, well, I'm too busy. John, that's all very well, saying we need to be consistent, we need to do what I say, we need to ask all these questions, we need to hide, but I've got so many things coming at me. Where do I start? So that's where I want to share. Just finally, this is the quickest way to build trust, this consistency. So as I mentioned, this is where I want to share something with you. If you're busy, overwhelmed, how do I be consistent? And I love Mel Robbins. She's a personal development coach, has a lot of productivity tips, written a book called The 5-Second Rule, loads of free videos, loads of TED Talks. And I want to share a real quick video with you on how to beat overwhelm. Because I saw this just the other day and I thought, this is really powerful. This is really simple and effective.
And so when you feel overwhelmed, what I know about you is that your brain is full of a bunch of garbage. I am going to disappear overwhelm using a simple pitcher, mason jar, and a garden variety spiral notebook. I know. I'm not kidding. I'm actually going to disappear overwhelm. Overwhelm is something that you want to fight, because if you allow yourself to stay in a state of feeling overwhelmed by the amount of things that you have to do, that pressure and that uncertainty combined with this feeling that you can't get anything done is going to create anxiety in your life. It's going to impact not only your well-being, but it's also going to severely limit your ability to focus and get things done. So the most important thing with overwhelm is to understand what it is and a simple tool that you can use to get rid of it. So here's what we're going to do. So let's pretend that this right here, this empty mason jar, is your brain. In order to do your best thinking, you need to make sure that you've got the full capacity of your brain leveraged and pointed at the things that are important to you. Here's the problem. When you go through life, what happens is, your brain starts to fill up with information, and that's what creates a state of feeling overwhelmed. Being overwhelmed is nothing more than having a full brain. So as you go through your day-to-day life and you start checking email and looking at texts and looking at Facebook and sitting in meetings and flipping through television channels and sending emails and writing Excel spreadsheets and running and picking up the kids at work and getting another text and looking at Instagram and looking at Twitter and checking out the news, your brain gets pretty full, doesn't it? And so when you feel overwhelmed, what I know about you is that your brain is full of a bunch of garbage. And so, I didn't think about the drain draining. I hope that's not bothering you, but it's certainly going to bother me. What you need to do in order to fight overwhelm is you've got to actually do a brain dump. You got to get rid of all that stuff so that you've got an empty brain so you can focus again. So how do you do that? It's easy to do with a cup of water because you just pour it out. This is what you're going to do. You are literally going to dump out everything that's in your head onto this piece of paper. Every concern, every worry, every to-do, everything that's bothering you, that you're thinking about, you're going to write down. All right, and when you're done writing down everything that's in your head and there's absolutely nothing left, got something due tomorrow that I kind of forgot about. Once you get that stuff all down on a piece of paper, pull out a highlighter. Take a look. You could do everything on this list. You could. But what should you do? What are 3 things, just 3, that you should do in order to advance the things that matter to you? Let's see. I got to do that one. I got to do that one. And I got to do that one. The rest of this list is complete and utter garbage. It's other people's stuff. It's the email stuff. It's the meeting stuff. It's the stuff that's not all that important to me. It's not that mission critical. So by dumping everything out, I now not only have the 3 things I need to do, I've got a clear head so I can get it done.
So yeah, just 3 things of everything you could do. What are the 3 things that are most important right now? And again, this is something you're going to repeat perhaps many times during the day. Depends how much you've got going on, how much is in your head and how much you need to get out of your head. This was an eye-opener for me for two reasons. One is it's actually quite therapeutic just to write down everything that's going on in your head. And I say write down rather than type. Typing is better than nothing, but the act of physically writing it down, pen and paper, is just helpful. It's almost meditative. And as a result of that, you see everything in front of you, and that, knowing it's on a paper, is separating it from your head. Then pick out the three things. And the key thing here is, if you're going to do this at all, do it first thing in the morning. Because what you'll find is if you get into the office, in your office environment, or open your laptop, typically the first thing you do is going to get into email, look at calendars, what's going on. Someone's pinging me on Teams, someone's pinging me on LinkedIn, someone's pinging me on text. You're then driven by other people's agendas. That doesn't give you time. That doesn't give you the strategic thinking you need to do to add most value. And ultimately, the value creates trust for your clients and makes you a better leader. So take that time back. Focus that every morning on how can you get that overwhelm dealt with. So just to reinforce this, there's another really great toolkit about how you get organized from Brendan Burchard. So he builds on this overwhelm and has a toolkit here, which is focus on living your life as the greatest person you can be, which sounds a bit cheesy. I get that. But the point is, if you're focusing on the greatest you can be, you're actually giving yourself less stress because you're looking for ways to improve. You're looking for ways to learn. And that is the high human instinct on how you could do things better. So here you'll notice that the priorities are on this list, but Brendan Burchard has a much more complicated version, which I've just boiled down. I took this and made it a bit more straightforward for what worked for me. And I wanted to share this with you, is have the projects up top. There's usually 2, 3, maybe 4 projects that you're working on, big clients or big initiatives that you need to get moving. If you list the big wins up top, the big rocks they need to work through, that helps with your prioritization. So again, building back to that consistency. I'm too busy. Here's a way to get less busy. Here's a way to be more efficient, to build benefit to your working environment, and ultimately make time for those relationship connections that build trust. So coming to the end of point number 4 here, let's look at the learning here. Let's do these expert signposts. What have you seen that resonates with you most? And a question for you. I will be consistent by doing the following: doing what I say, asking what they need, not hiding, or other. Is there something else you can do to be consistent? So we'll launch the poll for this one. Share the results. So doing what you say, absolutely. Sometimes a bit scary because you don't want to make a commitment. But as I said, you can always update your client, team, partner on that commitment. Asking what they want. Again, great question at the end of any meeting or anything you're working through is there anything else? What keeps you up at night, as mentioned there? And not hiding, yes. Make some people uncomfortable, but trust me, not hiding is always going to give you a good result. And then Trish there was saying, follow up with the client. Yes, can never be too much. I often get this myself, is you're busy in the day to day and you think, oh, I'll chase up tomorrow, I'll follow up tomorrow, I'll follow up tomorrow. It's always worth doing, even if it's just a quick, hey, I was thinking about you. It's so easy to do these days with text and email and chat. And then Julie, great point there. Spend time in planning. There's a lot of great, if you look at the personal effectiveness, personal productivity, and some of the billionaires and entrepreneurs, all of them spend a good amount of time on strategy and thinking. And I've had to learn this over the last few years, I feel that output is everything, like working through as much as I can. But what I realized is when I step back for an hour or two, ideally every week, just to say, okay, where am I heading? What am I doing? Where can I add most value to my clients or myself for learning? Adds a great deal of value. And then Kirk, thank you. Delegate consistently. I hear delegation is difficult to do because we feel we should be able to solve it. It's me, I take ownership. So some people naturally want to solve it themselves. So delegating the work is definitely an art, but once you crack it, it gets amazing results. So thank you for that, Kirk. Stop sharing. Let's go back to the presentation, and we'll move on to number 5 of the elements for creating trust, becoming a trusted advisor, and a better leadership. So contribution. It's conveyed in focus on others, which again sounds really simple, but it is more difficult to put into practice. However, I'm going to break this down, show how you can do it in a straightforward manner. So the question would be, how many of you feel that your hard work is not appreciated? I'm doing all this hard work. Why won't they realize how much value it can add? Why don't they realize what an expert I am? And that's because you're not conveying your focus to others. So here's how you do it. I'm going to start with an example of a waiter. So you're in a restaurant. You're trying it out for the first time. Amazing menu, but it's a bit pricey. It's more expensive than you thought. So when the waiter comes over, you ask around recommendations. And rather than recommend the filet, which is the most expensive item on the menu, which you assume the most expensive is going to be the best, they actually say, well, why don't you try the chicken? It doesn't cost as much as the steak, the filet, and it's actually better quality. The waiter says, I actually quite like it the most. They've immediately created that connection and that trust because they've contributed to you. They're focusing on you. So think about that. That waiter, rather than recommending the most expensive item on the menu, they've said, actually, no, go a cheaper one. So for you, they've saved you money, check. And they're saying it's actually a better dish overall, check. They've built a connection. They've built contribution. They're focusing on what you want. So think about that with your clients, because the standard solution, the box solution, which you always go to, may not always be the best one. So if you break that down into how do I come up with a better solution, you want to make sure that you give them value over and above. And it can be as simple as we said before, even just asking them a question. So there are 3 ways. View from the balcony is different from the dance floor. I'll say that again. The view from the balcony is different from the dance floor. And the reason for that is because when you're on the dance floor, you're amongst everyone else. You may be the best dancer, but if you don't take the step back and look from the balcony, you can't see what's going on. So again, this is this context element. This is seeing what's going on in the department, the industry, what else is going on with them, building on that connection. Remember, you've asked them about something that's going on perhaps personally or in their work lives. You can give them a better perspective. Next one, number 2. Walk in their shoes. What are they going through right now? What are they up against? You're meeting them one-on-one, so you're having a really good discussion about solving that specific problem, giving them that report, giving them their answers, their schedules, their output, but they've got other things going on. You like to think that they're focused 100% on you, but in reality, there's other things they need to be looking at. They might be dealing with team issues, performance issues. They might be dealing with a cybersecurity issue, which is affecting the finance data. Again, it all comes back to asking those questions. If you understand how they're going through it, you can perhaps give them the answer in a different way. What I found recently is that I'm doing some Power BI training, some Power Query. We're automating the pull of data into the working papers to make the data automation much more seamless. What I found is when I was walking their shoes is they're actually running up against year end now. They're coming into performance agreements. They're setting objectives for next year. It's important, but not urgent. So I thought they needed this straight away. I thought I was lining up for training in December. We're going to go. But when I asked them about what else is going on, we realized that the best time for this training is actually March next year. So that was my recommendation. Rather than get the training now so I could get the engagement, I could get the training quicker, I said, no, let's wait. It's better for you. It's better for me. I can plan ahead. Ultimately, your team will be more focused in March and April, and then we get a better result. Back to that waiter analogy, I was giving them something that worked for them as opposed to what worked for me. And then number 3, just asking for feedback. Again, we ask questions, but take that one step further. Ask about feedback in terms of how they could deliver more. So, and how they could improve, how you could improve the service. And just real quick, want to leave you with another quick toolkit around reviews. If you're an early practitioner or you have a practice around the accounting, just asking for reviews is hugely powerful, because if you ask for reviews, you can then improve your services. As a result, you get testimonials, which builds trust, and that grows your business, which means you can ask for more reviews. So this is where I call this the circle of feedback. And again, very easy to do, but most people don't do it. It's amazing how people don't ask for feedback, because it's always like, oh, I'll get to that another day. But in reality, it's so easy just to send a quick Survey Monkey, or just asking, how did we do on that last report? And don't hide. You might think they're going to come back with negative feedback. And of all the feedback I've done over the years, very rarely is it negative. When you ask someone's feedback, they actually like the fact that you've asked them. They feel valued rather than just another number in your client list. Quick, interesting story is that when we were improving the sales process for a financial services company in the UK, we were giving them new laptops, we were building new applications to issue insurance policies, and we were going on the basis that issuing insurance policies was the fastest thing we need to do. Get the policy in the customer's hand as quickly as possible, because they don't want to waste time filling in forms. Believe it or not, when we asked the customers what they valued most, it wasn't the speed of the insurance certificate. That was important, but what they really valued was flowers and chocolates. Because what had happened in previous years is the sales agent had visited the client and the customer, and when they were issuing the insurance, they said, when you get the certificate, your policy be in place, but you'll also get a box of chocolates and a bunch of flowers. So the customers were expecting that, and that word of mouth got around, that when you buy insurance from this company, you get a box of chocolates and a bunch of flowers. We actually found that was the easiest, quickest thing to build business. The insurance policy was absolutely key, but flowers and chocolates were the biggest growth of business. So now, as we round this out, we've just covered the 5. We've covered the clarity, connection, credibility, consistency, and contribution. And now, real quick, if nothing else from this presentation, I'm going to show how you can create rapport, be a better leader, build trust in just one meeting. The next meeting you have, here's a real quick, easy way to do it. So in clarity, we create an agenda. The amount of meetings I go into where we start talking, we don't show the agenda. So just show the agenda. And more importantly, ask, is there anything else you want to discuss? That quick tip for clarity. Then in the connection, as you're working through the meeting agenda, you're working through the topics, covering everything, all the key items. Ask questions. Is there anything else we've missed? Is there anything else we need to cover? Did we go far enough on detail on that? Let them help you define the best solution. Credibility, simple as options. I remember that playback, as in, I heard you talk about the data you need for this working paper. I think we've got 3 options here. We can automate this. We can bring in Power BI training. We can speed up the spreadsheet consolidation. What do you think? Again, giving options. Consistency. For meetings, just capture the actions. How simple is that? But how often do we not do it? Capture the actions, and then send them afterwards. Send them after meetings. So here's what I heard. Here are the actions. Here are the next steps. That's your commitment to them. And then the contribution can be as easy as following up. Might be sharing an article. We talked about if you saw this article, but it's just saying, oh, hey, went through the meeting. Did you have any other thoughts? Again, ask for their feedback. How did the meeting go? So again, how to create trust just in one meeting. Very easy to do with those 5 steps of clarity, connection, credibility, consistency, and contribution. And again, just to round this out, remember the the prisoner's dilemma at the beginning there, about how when we have that long-term relationship, we play the game over and over again with the same person, we build reputation and trust, and ultimately, inherently, as humans, we want to create value. This is really summarized in a quote that I want to leave you with by Zig Ziglar. If people like you, they listen to you, but if they trust you, they'll do business with you. And with that, thank you very much.